Our next speaker is Clark Stacey, who is the CEO and co-founder of WildWorks, and he's a real star.
So I'm very grateful to the Sandbox Summit for inviting me here to come and speak to you all this morning. Was very impressed with the conference yesterday. I noticed right away there's a great deal of intellectual weight and gravitas at this conference. A lot of smart people here. So think of me as the counterweight. My name is Clark Stacey. I'm the CEO of WildWorks. We make Animal Jam and some other fun games for kids. And I'm going to talk about something maybe a little controversial here this morning. I'm going to talk about monetizing games for kids. And hopefully give you some of the information that I'd wished that I had had when we started making kids apps, which is really around sizing the market and getting an idea for, can we actually sustain a company doing this? So here's the dilemma, right? Is that we want the very best developers out there making apps for kids, and we want them taking advantage of these amazing mobile platforms. Yeah, there's so much that we can imagine doing with it. There's so much that I've seen here that people are doing with it. But the problem is that we also want them to do that for either ridiculously cheap or for no money at all, ideally with no advertising. And that means that the only people that can afford to do this are governments or nonprofits or otherwise unemployable hobbyists. And we have a model, or did, for what that looks like in the US. It's public access television. While it does have its attractions, I don't know that you'd really leave your kids there for too long. So we have this problem. We want these developers to make money, but we also don't want them using the same aggressive monetization practices that we see in a lot of games that are made for adults. So I saw this study last year, around the same time last year. Dubit, never know how to say their name, did the study of the apps in the kids category. And they were looking at the monetization methods and comparing it to the games category. And they had some interesting observations there. They noticed that of the 50 highest grossing kids apps, most of them are paid download. That is, they don't have any in-app purchase, they don't have any subscription or anything else to them. You just pay once and download the game and that's it. So fewer than half, at least, didn't have any of that in-app purchase. And so they concluded, and they're right, is that your app doesn't have to be free in order to be successful in the games category, but that may paint a little too optimistic a picture of the games category because it doesn't really say, well, what does it mean to be successful there? So I looked at, just recently, at the 20 highest grossing apps in the kids category. Looked at the monetization model, plus the type of game and the target audience. Saw that, first of all, that most of them are not games. Most of them are subscription-based educational apps. Most of them are not for kids, at least in the demographic of our products, which is a little bit older. They're mostly for preschool, early readers. And most of them, the most successful ones, are using a subscription model. Companies like Age of Learning doing some very good work and enjoying some well-deserved success there, but they're mostly subscription-based video or storybook platforms where you kind of get all you can eat for one subscription price. So what does it mean then to be successful in the kids category? The top gross, we know what it looks like in the games category, right? The top grossing games, it gets a lot of press. They make millions of dollars per day. How much do the top grossing apps in the kids category make? And does having one of those actually give you enough money to build a business around it? So I'll kind of give you the background on this. I'm going to show you some data that will hopefully help you size this market a little bit. So we have this game called Animal Jam, web-based, been around since 2010, has about 50 million players worldwide. It's in 5 languages. It's done quite well on subscription-based monetization. And about 6 months ago, we wanted to bring this experience, or an experience, to mobile. So we launched a game called Animal Jam Play Wild. And so far, we've just begun to do some formal, what you might call user acquisition, but up until now, the only user acquisition was just announcing it in the Animal Jam web game. And it's doing well for us. It's at about 2 million downloads. It has about a little over 100,000 daily active players, as opposed to about 500,000 on the web game. But what's relevant for our discussion here is that it's been among the top 10 grossing apps in the kids category since launch, and usually in the top 5. So while I don't know what other games are making, and you probably couldn't tell you if I did, but I do know what ours is made. And so I thought I could show you some numbers here and maybe try and extrapolate from that some information that might be useful for you if you're considering making apps for the kids category. So this is looking at one day in December where Play Wild got up to, I think it was 130 or something on the US games category. That day it was also the #2 grossing app in the kids category overall, #1 in kids 9 to 11. And US iPhone revenue for that day was a little under $15,000, or just under 1% of what the games category would have been that day. And daily revenue, as it does in the kids category, or in the games category, falls off precipitously from #1 even to #5 and further below that. So that's one day, and that's just one iOS platform, iPhone. But developers want to know, what does it mean to succeed overall? You know, what's the revenue I'm going to try and build a business around? So this is looking over the past 90 days. Play Wild has variously occupied the top 5 spots in the top grossing list of the kids category. So I looked at revenue on each day over that 90 days and correlated it with each spot that it occupied in that top grossing list, so that I could give you an idea by averaging that out about what each spot in the top grossing list of the kids category was worth to us, at least, for both iPhone and iPad. And what that meant was that if you were at the very top, it was about $25,000 a day. And then it drops pretty quickly to, by the time you're down to the #5 spot, it's about $2,500 a day. And then this is what this would look like if you were able to sustain that annualized. So if you're able to get into that spot and stay there, this is what you would expect to make during that period. So kind of bottom line, and this is the information that I wish that I'd had when I was when we were first launching into this on the App Store. What does that mean if I'm trying to talk to investors, if I'm trying to convince my team, hey, we can make a living doing this, this is going to be worth it? So a couple of points. First of all, for us, and I think for most people, Android revenue, about 10 to 15% of iOS revenue. So if I add that up, I subtract the 30% platform cut that comes from Apple and from Google Play, you have an idea of what one app will make in the top 5 kids category slots on iOS. And this is US only. You will make some money internationally, but most of it will probably be North America at least. And again, to hit these numbers, you have to achieve this ranking and stay there for a year, which in and of itself is no mean feat. But what it means overall is that your revenue for 1 year at the top of the kids category, top of the kids top grossing, will be equivalent about to 1 day in the games category. Except, here are some apps for kids that are in the top grossing of the kids category. They are making some big numbers there. So you would expect that they would be at the top of the kids category, right? They're not there. They're not in the kids category. They don't qualify to be in the kids category because Apple requires games in the kids category to be COPPA compliant, to be protecting kids' privacy. It means that they can't link to social media. It means that they can't have app trackers that are tracking their personal information. In other words, some of the most profitable apps for kids are succeeding in part by pretending that they're for adults. Bottom line, the kids category is never going to be the home of $1 million a day games, and that is actually as it should be. The reason is that $1 million a day games get that way by having what they euphemistically call whales. That is a small percentage of players that pay a whole lot of money per month. Swerve announced something yesterday, some data that, I think over 50% of the revenue in the games category comes from 2% of the players. That's staggering. But in order to get that, in order to get people to pay that, what you need is to engineer your games around allowing big spenders to spend big, right? So they do this by selling items in the game that are consumed in the game world. And there are many ways to kind of build pressure around that, excuse me, many of which I'm sure that you're heard of or familiar with. Monetization loops, things that encourage me to come back to the game or that cut me off if I'm playing and I need to pay something to continue playing, getting to the next area. Loss aversion, if my virtual animal is going to die if I don't feed it or if it's going to whine at me. Sunk cost fallacy, this is similar to loss aversion, but it's basically saying that if I've paid once, that psychologically I'm thinking that if I don't pay again to complete this level, then the initial investment is lost too. And the currency abstraction, which is actually really interesting and is a principle from economics, and I think it can be used responsibly. It saved Brazil's economy back in the 90s, which was an interesting story, but it means that the true cost that I'm spending for something, I'm not buying this for $5, I'm buying it for 56 coins, right? So I'm kind of obscuring what I'm paying that way. So why is this bad for kids? I don't need to tell the people in this room, certainly, that it comes from brain development. The prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain involved in planning and decision-making, basically deciding if something's a good idea or not, is not fully formed in childhood. In fact, it's not fully formed until we're in our mid-20s. It means that children are not just ill-equipped to deal with these monetization psychological pressures, they're biologically incapable of it. It's really just not fair. So when we were trying to figure out how we're going to monetize our Play Wild game, one of the first things that came up is how about subscriptions? You know, they're then unambiguously ethical, they're well understood by kids and parents. And it's worked very well for us on the web. What we found, though, is that parents of older kids, particularly in our demographic, don't really like this monetization model. And one of the main reasons is that kids in this demographic are playing more apps per day than any other demographic, usually 5 at least at once that they're skipping around in between. Are you very likely to pay for a subscription when your child is that uncommitted to an individual app? It's not likely. It does work well for younger kids, for preschoolers, and that's where we're seeing a lot of this. Currently the top 5 apps, I haven't looked today, but the top 5 grossing apps in the kids category are probably subscription-based things for preschoolers. Excuse me. We didn't go with subscriptions because of the demographic focus and because of the fact that we didn't think that parents would be as inclined to pay that as they do on the web. However, because our audience is different. Yeah, the audience for Animal Jam, as you can see, our demographic spread there, it kind of peaks around 9 to 11. And while most of these apps that are succeeding in the subscription model are overtly educational, we do have educational DNA in the game. We have a partnership with National Geographic that has enabled us to include a lot of curiosity-building science and nature content in the game. But that's really our goal, not to be educational, but to inculcate curiosity and then give kids the tools to drill down on the stuff that interests them. But we're not trying to represent ourselves as an educational game that has quantifiable educational effects. We're not cross-listed in the educational category. It's a game, and it's cross-listed in the games category. So where did we wind up? Not choosing the subscription model, and we don't accept advertising in Animal Jam. We went with what I like to call content freemium. That is durable content that is purchased once in the game, and then you have it forever. One of the things that we look at in Animal Jam on the web is when children first convert, or when parents first convert to subscription there, what is the first thing that the child does in the game? Because that's probably the thing that they were most excited to do that was on the other side of the paywall. So what is the first thing that they do? And that's kind of indicative to us of that was probably at least instrumental in bringing about the conversion. And overwhelmingly, what they do is they go and acquire new avatar animals. Right? You get two animals that you can become in Animal Jam for free, and that gives you access to the entire game, all the educational content, all the mini games and things, but it's just those two animals. And if your favorite animal is one of the other ones, then you're going to be inclined to want to subscribe so you can be that animal. And that's a very compelling thing in the web game, and we assumed that it would be in the mobile game as well. So that's really what we built our monetization around. Is we have these other animal avatars in the game, and for each one of them, we created an associated ebook that is a fairly robust book about foxes, for example, about real foxes, that provide the child with a lot of information about that subject, which we presume that they're probably their favorite animal they're very interested in. And then kids use the different animals that they have to go out and acquire the in-game currency, so that they're not having to go to mom every time they want to get a hat for their fox or something. So by associating first of all, it's a durable purchase that once I bought the fox, I can make more foxes. I have the fox, it's unlocked. And I also have this ebook so that as a parent, if my child no longer is excited about this game in a few months, then at least they have this ebook. So this is a difficult path. It means that we've got to have a big catalog of stuff to sell, and it means that it's got to be pretty compelling stuff. We got to figure out what should or shouldn't be there. We got to dial in the pricing and all of that. But we have kind of a guiding principle of what should be on that paywall, and that is if this were something as a toy that I, as a retailer, had sold to a parent, would I want to be there when the child opened it, right? Is this going to provide enough value and meet the expectations enough that when it's opened up, it's going to be, oh, cool, and not, oh, they got me, So this content freemium, the idea around it is that we're selling these durable items. Buy it once, you have it forever. And I distinguish this from consumables, which are kind of the core of monetization in the games category. But simply saying that we're not going to have consumables for sale in the game does not necessarily, in and of itself, mean that this is ethical monetization. It does help us avoid creating whales, but there's still a lot of potential for abuse in this. So after a lot of discussion around WildWorks and with peers in the industry, we created kind of some draft principles for monetizing with in-app purchase in kids' games. Some guidelines that we could follow and that I could come here and talk to you about. And one of the things here that I should be clear about is that when it comes to in-app purchase, this is really only applicable to kids in our demographic. This is not applicable to early readers. This is really 9 and up. It's parents need to decide what's appropriate for their kids, but at least for my kids, that's where it would be. So we don't claim that these are the perfect guidelines. We're certainly open to criticism and questions about them. This is a learning process, but we think it's also a good thing as an industry that we should be talking about. The first, as I've said, is to be wary of consumables. The second, free means free. That is, if I buy a virtual car in your game, it's not cool to also sell me gas to run it, right? Or if I buy the sword, I shouldn't also have to buy energy to go out and use the sword. It's a toy. The way that a child thinks of it is it's a toy. And once you've sold it to them, they have it, and they should be able to play with it and do whatever they want with it, right? It's theirs. Don't sell sea monkeys. I should probably explain that a little bit. So when I was a child in the 70s, the pinnacle of exploitative monetization of children was in comic books. And sea monkeys, as an example of this, you can see the ad promised me what was on the left, which was a bowl full of naked people building a castle that I would be very engaged with. Family would gather around. We would talk about. What I got was a plastic cup full of brine shrimp, which are these hideous little things you see on the right, which if you found them in your basement, you would probably just burn your house down and move. So what I mean when I say don't sell sea monkeys is don't sell disappointment, right? There should be surprise, there should be delight, but you should never make parents or kids feel hoodwinked by having made an in-app purchase in your game. When a child buys something, it's theirs. Talked a little bit about, and transparency. I think that means be upfront, first of all, about the presence of in-app purchases in your game. Present your privacy policy in understandable, clear language. Simplify conversion rates between real money and virtual currency, so you're not obscuring what's being spent. And overall, be open upfront with parents. Parents are the customers as much as children are. The only way to build trust with them is to build a trusted brand. And you do that by the way that you treat them in your monetization. So that's what we've tried to do, and it's the means by which we're monetizing Play Wild. So what have we learned? We've learned that our revenue is very content-driven, as you would expect it, with kind of a catalog-based app. You can see in the first couple of months after release here that we really didn't have much to sell in our online store. Then we did a big Avatar release in early December, and revenue shot up. It's also very much driven by school schedules, right, which is also true of the Animal Jam web game. But it surprised us a little bit in mobile because we figured if they had a mobile version of the game, that they'd be more inclined to have it with them, and maybe they'd play it at lunch, or maybe it would flatten out the revenue spikes because it was played more throughout the week. But then when we looked at where the revenue was coming from in terms of the platform, it was not that surprising. 77% of the revenue coming from iPad versus iPhone, and we know that that's really more of an evening and weekend device than the more portable iPod Touch or iPhone. We found, not too surprisingly, that Avatar animals are the best sellers. But this isn't really sustainable for us for an app that we want to continue growing over a period of many years. We'll run out of animals, for one thing. But also we just, we need to keep excitement there, and we need to keep interest, and we also need to have a variety of the educational content that parents hopefully come to associate with our brand. So we need to build up a large catalog of stuff and cycle it, much as we do in the web game now. We've been happy to see so far that of the parents and players who do pay anything, almost all are paying $5 a month or less, or roughly equivalent to what they would be paying in the subscription-based web game, which is good. We don't want them paying more than that. We don't want them buying all of the content in the game at once. We don't want whales. Whales in adult free-to-play games are what sustain it. But in kids' games, whales will capsize the boats and drown everybody in them. Because they will bring down the wrath of regulators and parents, platform holders. Because of that, I think ethical monetization of kids' games is really the only type that makes business sense. So, kind of sum this up and hopefully give us time for questions if anybody has any. The first part of this plan we just talked about. We're going to avoid this slash and burn monetization. Follow these principles, build up a catalog slowly. The second, focus on the social. This has really been the cornerstone of the growth in the Animal Jam web game. That is social features that enable, to the degree that parents give permission or decide is appropriate for their child for them to interact with other kids. They can do that by chatting, by trading items. The chat goes through our heuristics and filters. And children, who are younger, early readers can have a no chat experience at all, or something that's just emojis and bubbles, up to a filtered dictionary-based type chat that they can engage in with parental permission. The third is a move to virtual currency that we just made. So initially we were selling, if you wanted to buy the Fox avatar, you would pay $1.99, you would get the Fox avatar in an ebook. But as the catalog of stuff grew, we realized that that wasn't really sustainable to sell these things directly in real money that way. It becomes very unwieldy to have this large catalog and not have kids be able to manage individual purchases once their parent has decided that they can buy something. There are very good UI reasons for the implementation of a premium virtual currency, but it's also a slippery slope, and it's something that we hope parents and the rest of our industry will hold us to a high standard and be watching what we're doing and call us if we're not adhering to the principles that we've laid out. If you're going to do a virtual currency, it needs to be understandable what the conversion rate is. It needs to provide the kind of value that we were talking about, not selling sea monkeys. And the purchases have to be durable. You can't sell things that are consumed in the game in the interest of getting kids on a purchase cycle that is unending for parents. And finally, we'll keep building this content library and keeping an eye on retention and the pace of monetization, because that's indicative of whether or not we're creating whales in this demo, which we don't want to do. I'm again very grateful for your time here today. If we do have a few minutes for questions, then I'd be happy to answer any.
Hi, Clark. I have a question. Is this on? So for the 45 minutes per session, play session, which is probably one of the highest in the business, you mentioned your social features. How much of that 45 minutes do the kids actually spend in chat?
So how much of the daily active playtime is spent in chat? In the web game, during the school year, it's on average about 60 minutes per session. In the web game now, or in the mobile game, it's about 35, 40 minutes as indicated there. And of that time in the web game, almost all of that is spent socially. It's spent chatting with friends. It's spent, we consider things like designing your den or designing your character to be social, or creating art in the art studio. Anything that's not just you in the room. So watching videos and things would not qualify. But I would say that about 2/3 of that time, even in the mobile game, is spent in social engagement of some kind, maybe trading items with other people, or just chatting or going to parties and that kind of thing.
Yeah, two quick questions. One, what's the most effective customer acquisition vehicle for you, and is that different from the adult-oriented games? And second, if you knew everything then that you now know, would you still have done it?
The most successful customer acquisition vehicle is to have a big brand like Animal Jam that you can go into the App Store with and advertise in. We got 2 million downloads in a couple of months without having to spend anything, just by telling kids in the web game about it. But that's not applicable for everybody, obviously. Beyond that, working with the platform holders so that hopefully you have some support from them in terms of featuring or acknowledging your app, I think is important. There are a few and increasing number of COPPA compliant paid user acquisition channels. That is, they don't have the same tracking and attribution that most of them do in the adult categories. And I can email you some recommendations if you want to hit me up at the Twitter address there. but really, that is the tough thing in the kids category. Look at the subscription-based things that are succeeding there are they've made a direct appeal to parents and teachers that is legitimate and has been successful. But parents and teachers are the only ones who are going into the kids category looking for something fun to do. Kids aren't. They're going where the games are that we would rather they weren't playing because of the way that they're monetized. They're going into the games category. There is, I think, an increasing movement to more channels for paid UA that are legitimately COPPA compliant. I think we'll see more of that. I think that there are other advertising channels that are emerging that are very interesting, things like Super Awesome in the UK, focusing on ethical advertising practice for kids in digital media.
Hey, Clark, thanks for the great set of starting guidelines. I do have a question on the durable side of the goods. What happens when a child leaves, stops using or stops having an account? Is there any way for them to take those durable goods with them, or is the duration really only if they're using the site or the app?
No, that's a good point, and that's part of why we've associated these ebooks with our purchases, because those are something that if the child's no longer playing in the game, they still have access to these, and they're really pretty robust multimedia ebooks about individual animal species that have been very popular in the web game too. So there is something truly durable past the digital experience, but ultimately we're talking about items made of pixels, and they are as durable as items made of pixels can be. Yeah.
I have a question about how you've got some animated content of these animals, and then you've got some real photographic content, and where the transition is in the age interest, and a little bit of the age thing, but also there's a great sort of disconnect with a lot of kids who are in the spectrum of learning problems, that the representation is not so much. So I was just a little bit curious about how the animation leads into the photographic content.
No, that's a good question. So Animal Jam on the web is a pretty busy video platform, as well as just the social game that it is. We serve up about 4,100 hours of video content a day in Animal Jam web. And the way that you access that in Animal Jam web substantially is by going to movie theaters in the world. So we have an aquarium themed around Tierney Tees, who's an oceanographer who does a lot of work with us, and you'd see mostly ocean conservation related and ocean animal related content in there. But you go into a movie theater and you can choose a video to watch. And that is something that younger kids, you're quite right, are more inclined towards than the social play or mini games or things like that. That transition elsewhere we have kind of throughout the world in Animal Jam in both games. We have items or little animals that run by or things in the biome that are highlighted, and when you tap on them or click on them, then what comes up is an explanation of what this is and how it fits into the ecosystem of the real world. So, that might be a lizard that you see go by, and then you'll find out what lizard species live in this type of tropical rainforest biome, or it might be plants or other things. One of the objectives in both games is collecting all of these little facts, and when I do, I start to unlock some fun virtual items when I collect them all for one particular biome. So we don't mix it in the virtual world itself. You're not going to encounter photographic stuff adjacent to virtual stuff, because that would be incongruous, I think. It's more when I make a selection to find out more about something that it will take me into a real world text or videos about it.
The ethical advertising platform that you mentioned?
Yeah, and I wish I had the names of a couple that we've experimented with off the top of my head. But this has been a concern for anybody involved in marketing in the App Store. Has been, can they find a way to do this with COPPA compliance, so that if they're going to put your ad or your video ad into other games, that one, they can guarantee you that those won't be inappropriate other games, and two, that they aren't going to be doing the same types of individual user tracking and attribution that they do, since most of these advertising platforms are CPI based, that is, you're paying per installation of your game. So these would be CPM based ad networks where that data isn't collected on an individual level. And candidly, they're not as effective. They're not as expensive, but they're not as effective. But if you want to contact me offline, I'd be happy to give you some references to specific ones.
How have you partnered with brands that live in the real world, right? We have a lot of brands here that are in print publishing, toys, consumer products, a lot of positive things for kids and families who are digital in some way, but their larger business model includes serving families across all those touch points. I'm wondering if you have any insights in that from all the years you've been operating.
Yeah, the line that we've kind of drawn is we don't have any third-party advertising in the world itself. The only thing that we've done like that, I mean, aside from a partnership with National Geographic, we're a licensee of National Geographic, and their logo appears in the game, particularly associated with content that they've created or that we create together. We have just entered the realm of licensing in consumer products, and we have a really cool toy line launching in June in the US, and some apparel and scientific toys and books and things that are launching a little later on in the summer, and we're pretty excited about that. How we've done those partnerships, we did not get into licensing early on because I think we saw some other kids brands fail, because they were trying to do everything at once. It was going to be the cartoon and the toy line and the game, and it was all going to be so awesome, and it was all going to come out at the same time. And none of them were really particularly good, and so it didn't really go anywhere. We've been focused exclusively on the game, and hopefully let consumer products and that sort of come about of its own gravity. So that the partnerships that we do have are with people that we want to work with for a long time, that we know are going to do really good stuff, and we're not going to go out and sign 100 licenses and flood the market with crap, and none of it sells, and then you only get one bite at that apple. So. All right. Thank you, everybody.